1, 2, test. Hey, excellent. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. And to probably I don't know, maybe the fourth or fifth seminar you've seen on continuous learning culture today, judging by the synopsis we read earlier. My name's Carl Hodler. I'm the co-founder of StoryTagger, and today we just kind of want to explore really how we can support a continuous learning culture with user-generated video. Now, a quick disclaimer, this is the bit that I'm kind of expert in, so the only bit of crowd sort of interaction that we're really going to be doing today is, I just wanted to get a kind of, because it's a big thing, continuous learning culture. There's so many different elements to it. So, to the annoyance of the sound guy, I just want to try and get some ideas from you guys on what you think constitutes or plays a role in a continuous learning culture. So, who's been to a session on continuous learning culture already today? You must have done. Does anyone want to shout anything out? Oh, come on, there are loads. Shall I start? Okay, so modeling positive leadership behaviors. Better engaging your people to encourage retention rates, proving the value of learning. They're the three that I wrote down just before this. And so these are all things that we try to encourage to create an environment of continuous learning. The idea of a continuous learning culture, and I was just chatting to David James earlier, and on one of his podcasts earlier this year, he was talking to Toby Newman, and Toby was questioning the fact that, so we go to school and we have quite a mandated learning structure in school, and so it's not surprising that people go straight from school into the workplace, kind of expect a sort of mandated structure to how they learn there. But people who go to university who have more of an open-ended learning experience, many of them still end up in the workplace expecting that more structured way of learning, being told what they need to learn, and taking instruction and guidance on that process. And that made me think, well, if we're not really taught that kind of mandated structure of learning, then maybe it is more of a cultural thing. And maybe it is to do with the fact that since you go back to the first industrial revolution, people working in factories like this, you went in expecting to be told what to do. And then if you go back slightly further to the kind of apprentice model, and that was very much a formulated model where people were told what to do. So maybe it is more of a culture piece that we need to change, the way people behave in the workplace, and changing that. So supporting a continuous learning culture is a little bit more of a kind of change program. And I kind of grabbed the first words I could find around change programs. We all know this. I'm terrible at changing things. This is exactly how I feel if I'm asked to change anything. And the problem is that when you try and mandate change, especially around the way that we learn, kind of using phrases like self-directed, self-service, self-managed, and I've done this. I've worked on campaigns years ago where we were trying to create a sort of self-service culture and mandate that on people. Say, this is how we do it now. You are responsible for your learning. Here you go, fill your boots, go and learn. And it kind of puts a barrier in the way of people taking that message on. It's really difficult to be told to change your behaviour. So what we're interested in with using user-generated video is to think of it more about creating a movement. So looking at the people who are already embodying the behaviours that you want to have in your future state and amplifying that behaviour to try and influence the rest of your population. And user-generated video, it doesn't just feel more authentic, it kind of is more authentic. You're face-to-face with the person who's sharing something with you. They've shared it in quite a comfortable environment at a time and a place of their choosing. And you're kind of face-to-face, eye-to-eye, and that's the way that we typically kind of communicate with each other. We've only been sending emails quite recently. There's so much nuance and humanity that gets lost in written communications. There's something really powerful about seeing someone telling you something face to face. And when you've got that kind of knowledge sharing environment, then you start getting into some very interesting experiences that come out of people sharing in that way. So if you're, if you're asking people from, let's call it the shop floor, to share experiences of how they're learning or how they are taking on knowledge and sharing it, you get really authentic stories. You get very relatable experiences which kind of reflect in the fact that we trust them. People are using real language. It's really difficult to connect with real language when you're not actually working in that environment. And when you start capturing those real experiences in that real language and then amplifying that, people will listen because they'll recognize it intuitively. And we all do this every day on like Amazon and shopping sites. We look for people like us who are doing things or buying things that we want to buy, and we're judging kind of the nuances in their language, how they describe things, to see if they are like us, to help us work out whether they are somebody who we can trust to support us with how we're thinking. So this is all really kind of important stuff to be able to flow through some of the kind of more interesting ways of cultivating, nurturing people to think about learning in a different way. So really it's a very simple model. You're using your advocates, influencers and champions, which every organisation has them, and you'll know who some of those people are. There'll be a bunch that you don't know, but you start with the ones that you recognise. And they're modelling those future behaviours, and they go ahead and influence everybody else. But the problem that we repeatedly bump up against is that if we want to capture those people on video, they don't necessarily work in the same space that we do. So our people are scattered over the world, they're all working in different time zones, their calendars are extremely complicated, and they might be very difficult to access anyway. So if you want to go out and film those people with a production crew, that's not going to be a particularly popular conversation that you have with the budget holder. And typically what happens is you conduct a telephone interview and you write up that interview, and the people who you really need to reach kind of don't read it. So it's not really, it's kind of it's an exercise that you're going through, but it's not necessarily having the impact that you need it to. So a few years ago, Group Head of Learning and Talent came to us. It was after she asked us to kind of get video advocacy from it was supermarket employees scattered over the UK, and the costs of doing it, the time required to do it was just unfeasible. And she asked a very sensible question: why can't our people just film this kind of content on their phones? If they're an advocate of learning, if they're modelling new ways of learning, why can't they just share that on their phones, and we can just save thousands of pounds and it's job done? And it's a really good question. But there are a few reasons why this hasn't happened at scale so far. There have been pockets of success, but not so many. So contrary to what your teenage kids will tell you, we're not all YouTubers. We're not all kind of having experiences and recording ourselves talking about it and sending that out to our subscriber base so we can earn some nice money on a little side project on YouTube. So people don't naturally do this. It's not a natural behaviour that people go through. They need nurturing, they need confidence being built, and they really need to be shown the value in what they're going to be doing to encourage them, nurture them, nudge them into that behaviour. People bump into a lot of technical problems. So if you're on TikTok and you're just sharing a picture of you kind of making a dog pull a funny face, there's very little that you can do wrong on that, apart from maybe the dog getting distracted and running off. If you're trying to share a more complicated story, if you're reflecting on a workplace experience or a way you've been sharing knowledge, there's a lot more that you need to build into that. So being able to technically structure that story, to be able to use the technology, kind of editing the video, there's a lot of things, and even down to like not putting your face in the right, so filming yourself and there's just your head in the shot. People just don't understand that that's a problem, and it stops people from making the videos. Outside of this room, active reflection isn't a kind of natural behaviour. I think anyone here who kind of does leadership programs, classroom-based activities, will know this. It's a push to get people to create learning logs. It's a push to get people to take reflection out of their minds and do it in a way that makes it more active and makes it into a format that people can share and the wider population can benefit from. And when organisations do get their people to make self-film videos, they're obviously, I mean, there's some good stuff in there. There's some really good stuff in there, but they're very long. They're kind of rambling. They need a lot of editing, and the poor old L&D team, or the guy or the woman who knows how to use the editing tools, they'll be stuck there for the best part of a day, pulling the best content out of this video and sharing it, and it chews up far too much time. And then the final barrier, or the final major one, is transferring large video files from our devices onto corporate networks. Is really hard. I mean, you know, we use WeTransfer, Dropbox, Google Docs. You know, it's part of our jobs, moving big files around. Normal people don't really do that so much. So they don't really know the technology. And also, if your IT security team get wind of that, then there'll be some tricky conversations to have there as well. So this is the plug. When you are able to structure people's experiences, reflections, knowledge, feedback into short, succinct, sort of value-led videos, those reflections and experiences can support a whole range of priorities that we're seeing in L&D, and those human stories can help support those priorities and really help support some of the big business needs that we're seeing in organisations through the sharing of human stories from our people, our kind of most important resource. So what I just wanted to share is some stories from our customers on the kind of things that they've been doing to help support their learning cultures. We've got a toolkit that you can download, which I'll share a link for at the end. So I'm just kind of giving some highlights through that. And so kind of really the first one we want to look at is inspiring open leadership and colleague engagement. So City and Guilds have been using StoryTagger in a really interesting way, and it's not their L&D team who've been using it, it's the comms team. And the reason that's interesting is they've been using it in a kind of slightly different way to the learning teams, but it gives us some really good ideas on how stories from your organisation can really help kind of drive that movement, bring people along with kind of quite complex stories. And they've been going through a merger program. They had senior stakeholders within the company that was getting merged in the existing company who needed to share sponsorship stories to keep that merger program on track. We know that in a complex kind of environment like a merger, you need to have your sponsors communicating very clearly with everybody within the organisation to help bring them along, keep it moving on track. And they were able to capture these sponsorship stories from very busy senior people within the organisation whose diaries would have been an absolute nightmare to try and book in to capture video in a traditional sense, and who were scattered across the globe, so it would have been pretty hard to do that anyway. And they were able to help everybody feel part of something, so bring teams together, kind of build trust, and sort of introduce themselves. And they said it was the first time they've ever really been able to introduce a new senior leadership team to people within the organisation, or especially the leaders who are dealing with that merger process in such a human and authentic way. You got the sense that you'd already met the person just by watching that video that they'd produced. Another thing that's really interesting is showing what great leadership looks like in an organisation. So, I mean, many of us have probably been on programs where we learn the kind of mechanics of leadership, but we don't necessarily go into that understanding what amazing leadership in our organisation looks like beyond our own experience, which can be quite narrow. So being able to give people an idea of what great leadership looks like in our organisation and all the nuances and detail that are attached with that is a really powerful way of building that kind of momentum to learn, that nurturing people that they are going to be, again, part of that bigger story, but understanding why learning is going to really help them build the organisation to the kind of strategic goals that are being shared. And celebrating advocates, and this is more about the general process that you go through with user-generated video, but celebrating the people who do step up and share their stories is a really important part of not only demonstrating this is a behaviour that we want to amplify and spread out across the organisation, but also making those people who stepped out of their comfort zone feel as if they did it for a good reason. And again, they are all building towards that common goal. Developing future skills and capabilities. Cambridge University's Judge Business School are using user-generated video to, they're asking students from their MA Business Studies program to record reflections on interviews that they have. So they go out from the university to Google, Facebook, other big tech firms. They have an interview experience and they reflect on that interview experience, and then that gets shared with their cohort. So they're building a body of knowledge and expertise within their own group to aid and assist each other, but also help themselves go through that active reflection process to enable them to learn from mistakes they'd made or potentially what went well. And this is all really much, it's part of improving sort of the skills that we really need to demonstrate in 21st century business. So the ability to structure a story, to make reflective habit a practice, to think deeply and creatively, and also to build emotional intelligence. These are all things that we start developing when we are actively reflecting and sharing our thoughts on video, getting feedback from that, and making that reflective process, that storytelling, that kind of sharing of information, nice and concisely, informative way out to the people in the organisation. And that kind of learns into honing an elevator pitch, which is a really important skill for all of us, whether it's sharing an idea that we've had, or sharing the importance of a project that we're working on, to be able to concisely share the value, and understanding how to share that value proposition to the stakeholders is a critical skill. A lot of this started for us with career stories. I mean, career stories are such a mainstay of how we get to learn about learning opportunities within an organisation, and just seeing what other kind of opportunities exist within an organisation, so we can stay there and kind of move sideways, outwards in all sorts of directions. Adidas used user-generated video to recruit 250 sales operatives to their new flagship store on Oxford Street. And they were bringing existing Adidas teams in from around Europe. There were people starting with the organisation. There were people moving to London for the first time, and it was a big team to onboard. And they were really keen that that was made into kind of a human scale experience. So people shared experiences of Adidas. So, like, what was your first Adidas experience? They were bringing the brand values into how people were kind of introducing themselves. And they also asked people to share their experiences of why they were excited about moving to London and being part of that team. And what it meant was that people landing in the same space for the first time had already had introductions and sentence starters and conversation openers from that cohort. So it just felt a little slightly less intimidating, and again, sort of bringing what could be quite a terrifying experience a bit more down to a human level. It also enabled them to capture introductions from their senior leadership team across Europe and have those shared with the new cohort, so they didn't necessarily have to ship expensive people in to give those personal messages, introductions, to kind of bring that kind of new family together and help them share their purpose. And aligning our roles to the core purpose. I mean, it's a difficult one to sometimes spot when you're kind of in the thick of your job, but if somebody helps you understand the nuances of what you're doing in your role and how that directly applies to the core purpose of the business, and those stories are being shared by people who are kind of working on the shop floor, if you like. And that's a really powerful way of, again, helping everybody feel part of a story and all aiming towards a common goal. So amplifying innovation and curiosity. Curiosity, I can't say today, is a really important part of this continuous learning culture, making people think that by going out there and discovering and learning new things, they can help solve some of the problems they bump into on a day-to-day basis. IKEA have been using user-generated video within hackathons to enable the teams to create learning logs of the experiences they've been having within those hackathons. That knowledge from these like micro silos, I guess you could call them, is then shared across all the groups, so everyone can collaboratively learn from what's happening in pockets with these individual teams. And the nice thing that IKEA are doing is they're then sharing those learning logs further with partners and outside partners. I think it's like Google or Facebook. They are sponsoring the winning team to go out to Silicon Valley and pitch their idea, and it's all become part of a collaborative process because people are able to share their learning logs, they'll be able to share their video in their flow of work as they're moving through that innovation process. And again, running competitions, experiments. We've seen leadership teams who put people through a classroom experience, and then cohorts get into small groups, they run experiments, again, keeping learning logs, sharing that knowledge, sharing the information they're pulling out of those experiments, and using that to the benefit of the wider cohort. Spreading good practice and being able to amplify the knowledge from SMEs is something that lots of teams are talking about. Verizon were able to capture the way that their top sales performers were able to engage new customers and distribute that amongst their field sales teams. So the field operatives were able to watch short videos that were very much aligned to a specific customer story or a specific product story, and just before they were going into that meeting they were able to very quickly pick up some of the language, again understand some of the nuance that goes in those conversations, and they were getting that information from the top performers, the people they knew would succeed in the organization, which was instantly trusted and instantly very valuable content. Just being able to get your subject matter experts to be creating content rather than just supporting the creation of content is a way of really scaling how you can get really important information and knowledge out to your people, and in a very agile sort of way. And lastly on this one, unwrapping real problems. Something that we found is that if you go to people with if you interview somebody or you send them a survey trying to get under the skin of a problem that you've solved, quite often you can influence how you put those questions in place that make people answer in a certain way, or maybe people have certain preconceptions that stop them from being quite so honest about how they're appraising some of the problems that you're asking them about. And we've seen user-generated video, when it's been used in a structured, guided way, helps people be a little bit more honest and a little bit more open and share some of the root causes that have been causing some of these problems. And quite often they can be really surprising and very much different to the assumptions that were made in the first place. And lastly, capturing evidence and proving impact. Bouygues Energy used user-generated video to capture feedback and testimonies from their kind of European team to support their award submission process. And what it meant they were able to do is, again, going back to that point of capturing that very real language, the nuance of the impact that was made, and because the team who were putting the award together could see colleagues from across the organisation talking quite passionately about the impact that had been made by a specific programme, they were able to sort of dial into the areas that were most important to colleagues and raise the importance of that within their award application. We talked a little bit about capturing learning logs, but one of the really nice things that we've seen about learning logs and structured reflections, especially as part of leadership programs, is that when a cohort comes out of a leadership program, you've got a bunch of data, you've got some sheets that people have filled in, which you go back to your sort of stakeholder group with to prove value. And the thing that we've seen when people are creating videos of their experiences and the impact that the training has had on them in the workplace, when those videos are edited together into a montage to share a story of the cohort experience, it's a really powerful way in for that team to sort of see those human stories, those kind of real reflections of the impact that the program has had on individuals and customers. And in some ways it gives them a route into the data through a different avenue, through those human stories. And lastly, just celebrating success and being able to have teams who may be distributed across different locations, or teams who potentially there may be a lot of home workers who don't necessarily get to celebrate so much as a group. Being able to curate those experiences and the impact that the sort of success has had on them, and then bring that all together using kind of asynchronous video and bring it together into one experience that really ramps up the volume on what's been achieved and the impact it's made, and that human story behind what it meant to people to be part of that story. So if you'd like to grab the toolkit that's got some really great resources in to help you use user-generated video within your programs, you don't have to use StoryTagger for this stuff. It just makes it a lot easier. Just jump onto that URL and you can get the kit. My name's Carl Hodder. As I said, I'm the co-founder of StoryTagger. We're just over there on that stand. The team are there ready to chat to you a little bit more about how we help people make videos, actively reflect and share knowledge across a range of organisations. We'd love to speak to you. I say please do grab the toolkit. I'm on LinkedIn. Say hi, and thank you very much. Cheers. Has anyone got any questions? We've got like 2 minutes. That's cool. Come to the stand and ask them there. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.